Warning, this video will contain spoilers for the Captain Marvel movie. So, happy now? We all prepared for what's about to happen? We all on the same page? You gonna stay off my tits? Okay then, moving on. So this episode and the next one are going to be about Marvel movies. I wonder, should I maybe have like a name for this month? You know, for hashtag branding? Welcome everyone to Marvel April? What, Marvel March made much more sense? Well, you could do Marvel May. No, that's too late. None of this will be relevant in a month. Anyway, we're going to dive right into everyone's favorite cinematic universe with Marvel Month. That's it, Marvel Month. We're doing Marvel Month, everyone. God, I'm bad at this. Hey everyone, my name is Jacob, but the trolls, they call me Snowflake. I'm not going to do that whole thing about like, share, subscribe, and Patreon thing at the beginning. You guys know the whole song and dance by now. You know what to do. I won't hold you all hostage anymore, though I will miss Now Let's Get Entitled, shall we? So I think I'm going to keep that at least. But now, let's get entitled, shall we, and talk about Captain Marvel. My thoughts on the movie as a whole can be summed up in about 2 words. Fuck yes. Seriously, this is a badass movie, and I enjoyed it immensely. I'd rank it lower than Black Panther, but it's up there. Seriously, how people can not like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'll never know. To be honest, I think I may have enjoyed Aquaman more, but that's honestly more my subjective opinion, and the fact that Captain Marvel was really, I think, made for women, which is totally fine. Like, not everything needs to be made for me, and everyone deserves to have their own movie. Black people have Black Panther, women have Captain Marvel, and the gays have Aquaman. Honestly, though, I think it's largely because I went into Captain Marvel and Black Panther with high expectations, and even though my expectations were exceeded, I went into Aquaman with no expectations whatsoever, and was so not expecting what I got. I can understand why people think that Aquaman isn't as good, but I just have so much fondness for it. Still, I think Black Panther, Aquaman, Captain Marvel, and Doctor Strange form my top favorite superhero movies in that order. The one thing I did notice at my screening is that a lot of people seem to really like the old technology references, but I was born in 1992, so like all of this was like part of my childhood. I was just sitting there in my seat going like, yeah, the old computer is slow. I don't know. I guess I don't really get nostalgic overall. I mean, my childhood was basically trauma stacked on top of trauma until high school, so as shit as I feel about myself now, I'll still take this over that any day. So in the end, like, those really didn't grab me, but the rest of the movie really did. To be perfectly honest, the whole Kree-Skrull war never really interested me in the comics. I always felt it was just one of those things which are just so convoluted and so indecipherable that they just make comics inhospitable for all but the most hardcore of lore fanatics. It's one of the reasons why I often look forward to new adaptations like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they provide a chance to simplify the comic canon and present it in a way that's actually digestible and comprehensible to non-lore fanatics. And I really enjoy the simplified story of the Kree and the Skrulls. The Kree in the comics are assholes, but overall they're at least mostly on the good side as far as Earth is concerned, while the Skrulls are pretty much completely evil. Like, there's a good Skrull, like 1 or 2 here and there, but they're basically, well, comic book villains. And I really liked seeing the whole thing flipped on its head in this movie. You start off in the movie believing that the Kree are the good guys and that the Skrulls are evil, maybe partially because the comics have primed you for that, but by the end of the movie you realize that the Kree are genocidal imperialists and the Skrulls are only trying to survive however they can. It was a really refreshing flip on a formula that I had honestly never been all that thrilled about or all that interested in. And I think that it's a really timely topic too. You know, not just with the colonialism and imperialist aspects to it, but with the fact that, you know, we kind of have the horrors of the global refugee and migrant crisis unfolding in front of us with no end in sight. Carol also starts out initially on the side of the Kree because, you know, that's all she's known up to that point, but then comes around to the side of the Skrulls once she and them are able to sit down and talk. I know some people really don't like this sort of plot, but I'm not one of them. You all haven't seen me on camera, but trust me, me, I am whiter than white. Seriously, I'm a pasty fucking vampire. And the reason I like this sort of plot is because I feel like this sort of thing is familiar to progressive white people like me. It's kind of the journey we all had to go through to get where we are now, because as we all know, all white people are horrible by default until proven otherwise. I even liked how the film had Carol bring up how she had, been killing Skrulls up to this point and asked for forgiveness, and Talos, the head of the Skrulls, saying, "Look, my hands are bloody too. I have no right to judge you. What matters is that you're helping us now." I thought that was a really sweet message and a really sweet moment. If there's one thing I could nitpick about the Skrulls, it's that in the comics, the Skrulls have no concept of gender. I mean, you have an entire species that can become basically anything and anyone they want, and can have literally anything they want between their legs at any time. Any concept of gender kind of just goes right out the fucking window with that. But in the movie, even though it's canonically stated that the Skrulls can become anything they want, they are still very clearly gendered. I would have really appreciated having them being genderless. I'm also just so endlessly delighted that Captain Marvel is basically confirmed as the Avenger, the model that many of the other heroes in the Marvel universe take after, and the one who paved the way for everyone else. Not to mention how the film sews up so many of the loose ends from films like the first Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, etc., etc. But now that those points are out of the way, I want to get down to the main point we're all here to talk about. There's already been a number of think pieces about the feminism in Captain Marvel and the film's focus on the everyday sexism that women face, and I don't really want to copy them. Plus, I already did an episode on a superhero movie being feminist. Listen to the Aquaman episode. So I want to go a little bit deeper and look at what specific type of feminism Captain Marvel presented, because it's a type of feminism which I've rarely seen portrayed on film. So for those who don't know, and when it comes to discussing comic books and comic book movies, that's not an insignificant number, feminist theorists have largely arranged the history of feminism in the West into what are called waves. There are about 3 or 4 of these waves. There's first wave feminism, which started around the mid to late 1800s and moved into the early to mid 1900s, and primarily focused on women's legal status in society, which, there was a time when women didn't have the right to inherit property or money, when women weren't considered legal entities in their own right, when women didn't have the right to divorce, and of course, when women didn't have the right to vote, though it took a lot longer for all women to be allowed to vote. First Nations women in Canada didn't get the right to vote until the 1960s. And there was a time in Western culture when women were largely not allowed to go outside the house without a male chaperone. Seriously, white people, it's not just the Muslims. Get off your fucking high horse. You'll often hear first wave feminism being referred to as the suffragette movement because women's right to vote and exist as legal entities was called women's suffrage. Second wave feminism came around the mid-1900s to the 1990s and was primarily focused around women's economic inequality. This is when the big push came for women to get into the workplace, because there was a time not all that long ago when it was believed that a woman's place was in the home. This was when equal pay for equal work came up. This is also when the big fight for women's reproductive rights started, specifically the right to birth control. Third wave feminism lasted from the 1990s into the 2000s and was defined by intersectionality, sex positivity, trans feminism, and on bringing feminism into the cultural consciousness as a whole. As a side note, many theorists have begun to say that we're currently within fourth wave feminism, which is focused around Me Too, harassment, and violence against women. Personally, I'm not entirely sure. I feel like Me Too is largely an extension of everything fought for in third and even second wave feminism, and I feel like third wave feminism is still kind of playing out and still hasn't really ended yet. This is why some third wave feminists often criticize the idea of waves in the first place. But if nothing else, when trolls complain about how third wave feminism is just so stupid and useless and feminism got everything it wanted in second wave, you can tell them that third wave feminism is so over, man, and that fourth wave feminism is where it's at now. Get with the times, troll. It also should be noted that the first 3 waves largely only correlate to Western feminism, with one of the features that has been brought up of fourth wave feminism being that it has finally gone international. Of course, each wave of feminism also has its flaws. First wave feminism was pretty overwhelmingly and horrifically racist. Second wave feminism was very thoroughly middle class, and it spawned everyone's favorite feature of online life, TERFs. And each wave also has its own movements within it, and the movement I'm particularly interested in terms of Captain Marvel is from third wave feminism, post-modern feminism. So, what the hell is postmodernism? Well, welcome to the question that philosophers and theorists have been asking since they coined the fucking word. No one knows. But the vague idea that people have come up with is that it's around the questioning of grand narratives and the deconstruction of binaries. Basically, it's about questioning the assumptions and binaries that we construct our idea of the world with. Light and dark, good and evil, order and chaos, insider and outsider, you get the idea. It's about breaking down these binaries and showing how, in the end, thinking in this way restricts our worldview and limits our possibilities. Postmodern feminism is postmodernism coupled with feminist thinking, being particularly interested in breaking down our concept of gender and deconstructing it. The work of Judith Butler is what many people would consider to be the urtext of postmodern feminism. Now, what the fuck does this have to do with Captain Marvel? Well, one of the criticisms which postmodern feminists and third-wave feminists have of second-wave feminism is that second-wave feminism saw the path to female liberation as making women abandon things that were considered feminine and pushing them into the masculine arena. The idea of leaning forward, basically, acting more like men in order to get ahead in a man's world. Postmodern feminism says that this is about trying to get women to conform to the masculine standard rather than the feminine one. And postmodern feminists point out that this is, in and of itself, just another form of oppression. You're simply swapping one form of restriction for another. Instead of having femininity forced upon them and having to deny any masculine desires they have, women must now strip all trace of femininity from themselves. Everything that could be seen as making them a woman. Everything that doesn't fit the new standard which they are now trying to conform to. And in the end, how different is that really from how things were before? Yeah, you're allowed out of the kitchen, but you're never allowed back in again. Carol Danvers is told by her commander, Jan Rog, to stop using her heart and start using her head all throughout the film. It's implied that this is something which is pretty common in Cree society, and I think that this is something which a lot of women will recognize. We live in a culture where it's just assumed that men think with their heads and women think with their heart, that men are rational and women are emotional. So by telling her to stop thinking with her heart and start thinking with her head, he's essentially telling her to be more like a man and less like a woman. But the problem with Carol, or Veers as she's known to the Cree, is that she can't trust her head because she doesn't remember who she is. Her head is all messed up, so she has nothing to trust but her heart. And it's ultimately her heart which makes her see the truth behind the Kree Skrull War and allow her to become the hero she is. There's two moments in the film which really stood out to me and made me realize that this was a postmodern feminist movie and not just a feminist one. The one that primed me for this realization is actually the latter of the two. There's a moment when Carol has full control over her power and she and Jan Rog face each other finally. He throws aside his weapons and tells her, now is the time to see if you can measure up to me. No weapons, no power, right here, right now. And then she just blasts him into the side of the mountain with her energy fists and says to him, I don't have to measure up to you. And this one line rang out to me because she could have worded it in loads of different ways. I don't have to prove myself to you. I don't have to stoop down to your level. Maybe I'm just misremembering it, but I'm pretty sure that instead she said, I don't have to measure up to you. Basically saying, I don't have to conform to the standards that you have set for me. My value as a person is not determined by whether or not I can meet your standards. My value is determined by the fact that I am a human being, and I won't deny parts of myself or kneecap myself just so I can meet your standards and be seen as worthy in your eyes. The second moment actually came earlier in the movie, and I only realized its significance in hindsight. It's when Carol is facing the Supreme Intelligence, the AI which governs Kree civilization. And Carol has this implant in her neck which contains and restricts her powers, and she pulls it out as all of these images of her growing up flash through her mind. There's her, racing go-karts with her brother, there's her riding a horse, there's her training for the Air Force, and she gets knocked down every time in these visions, but always gets right back up again. Basic feminist motif right there. But as she pulls out the implant, she says, my entire life, I've fought with one arm tied behind my back. What happens when I finally start fighting with both hands? This is obviously a reference to the implant she pulls out, which unleashes her full power. But why does she say, my entire life, I've fought with one arm tied behind my back? It's because her entire life, she's been expected to conform to the standards of either a woman, don't race go-karts, don't join the Air Force, etc., or to conform to the standards of a man and be cold, rational, aggressive, and masculine. Both of these options, in the end, kneecap her and deny an aspect of who she is. It's either tie one hand behind her back or the other, and it's only by rejecting the standards altogether that she is finally able to free herself and to unleash her fullest power. And what happens when she reaches her fullest power? She saves the world. And after she cosmic energy punches her old commander into a mountain, she puts him into a spaceship and sends him back to the Kree homeworld with a message for the Supreme Intelligence that she's going to go back there and she's going to tear all of it down. The entire system that the Kree have set up to oppress the galaxy. It's only through liberating herself from the standards that were imposed on her and rejecting the binary of acting like either a man or a woman that she is finally able to challenge the system itself and confront the structures which are responsible for the oppression of herself and others. And I think that that's a lesson for everyone too. That doesn't mean that we necessarily need to abolish the concept of gender altogether, just the standards which are applied to everyone to try and make them fit into one category or another, and the idea that our value is determined by how well or how poorly we conform to those standards. And now that I think about it, the Skrulls are actually kind of a representation of that rejection. The Skrulls can be as masculine as they want to be or as feminine as they want to be. As I said, in the comics, the Skrulls are culturally genderless, and just like they reject the oppression of gender, they wind up rejecting the oppression of Kree rule and the standards which the Kree hold them to. As a result, the Kree try to hunt them down as a way to define their rigid view of the world and to make the galaxy and everyone in it conform to their standards. And it's through her interactions with the Skrulls, maybe, that she learns this rejection, not only of gender, but also of the binaries set up around the Kree and the Skrulls, around what is good and what is bad, about what she should do and what she shouldn't do, all of this. The rejection of standards and standardization in general is the route to true freedom as a person, because standards and standardization ultimately lead to hierarchies and oppression. Besides, we're human beings, living, breathing, beautiful things which weren't designed in factory to meet specifications. Every single human being on this earth has a different construction of their gender. Every person expresses their gender and themselves in a different way. Basically, as I talked about in an entire episode on gender, which you should all totally go listen to after this one, we are all unique, beautiful people, and by applying standards, we become trapped in a box and unable to express who we truly are in all of our kick-ass beauty. We blind ourselves to our own beauty and our own power, and the only way to completely stop this oppression and restriction is to reject standards and reject the idea that our value is determined by how well we measure up in society's eyes. Because even if you are able to find power through meeting those standards and become the exception to the rule, as long as you exist within their standards, you are playing by their rules. You are playing out the role they set for you. Sure, you can do something to change the system from within it, and that does have value, but ultimately, freedom lies in the destruction of those standards. That should be our ultimate goal, the destruction of the hierarchical system in which we live. Anything else is only freeing one hand while tying the other hand in its place. Still, doesn't it just suck that rejecting gender doesn't let you punch people into mountains? Come on, what a ripoff. Especially when there are so many people in this world right now who really deserve to be cosmic force punched into a mountain. Where are our glowing lesbian cosmic space force powers? So, how awesome did you all think Captain Marvel was? What other feminist superhero movies have you seen recently? Just how angry does hearing the word feminist make you? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you like this episode, please like, favorite, rate, whatever you can do to show your appreciation wherever you may be listening to this. Follow and or subscribe for future episodes. If you enjoy this, or if you didn't, please consider sharing it with your friends so my work can reach a larger audience. And let me ask you all a question. Do you want to see this podcast keep going on into the future? Do you want to see more visual stuff done for the show? Do you want this podcast to become bigger and better? Do you want me to start doing live streams and start reviewing video games? Do you want me to buy more mannequins so I can finally experience what human contact feels like? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, please consider checking out the show's Patreon and throwing $1 or $2 towards keeping the show going. I don't enjoy admitting this, but when I say I have no job outside this podcast, I mean I literally have no job or income outside of what I get from this podcast, and trust me, that's not through lack of trying. I have tried. This podcast is basically my last attempt to actually be successful at anything. It's the only real option I have left anymore, and the sole breadwinner in my household is going to be retiring soon. At the very least, it would be great to finally have an income of my own and not be a burden on them, you know? Plus, I have fucking student loans to pay off, so any amount of help you can give would be very, very appreciated. But also, by becoming a patron, you also get access to rewards like joining my Discord server, which allows you to give feedback directly to me and interact with me. I want to have parasocial relationships with every single one of you. It also lets you suggest topics for future episodes. You can also get great rewards like your very own customized snowflake icon, access to Patreon exclusive audios, or even have me thank you at the end of every video. Not only will you be saving an autistic gay guy from a kind of desperate situation and getting some great rewards for it, you will also be helping this channel become better and better. I've got a lot I would love to do with this podcast and outside of it too, but everything in our capitalist society costs money, so if you want this podcast to continue and for it to grow and evolve, please consider helping it out. You don't know how much it will mean to me. Plus, I have a sex dungeon to build. but please only give if you can afford it. I don't want that on my conscience, you know? So, next episode in Marvel Month will be out in about 2 weeks' time, and let's just say that I'm going to be ramming a golden B infinity jeweled glove right up the ass of the discourse. No lube. Okay, maybe a little lube. So, until next time, may the privilege be with you. Stay entitled, snowflakes.